directly through the overseer's chest and piercing its heart. The monster gasped, thick black blood bubbling from its lips, before collapsing backward, dead. Chapter 20, The Emerald Network. With their leader dead, the remaining tech goblins broke. They scrambled for the exits, slipping on Kavya's ice, only to be ruthlessly hunted down by the Shadow Walkers and Raj's heavy shield bashes. Within minutes, the lobby was silent, save for the weeping of the rescued survivors. A doctor in a torn, bloody coat crawled forward, looking at Vikram as if he were an archangel descended from the heavens. Who are you? We are the branches, Vikram said simply, his voice echoing in the ruined hall. He walked to the exact center of the lobby, where a patch of decorative dirt and dying indoor plants sat in a circular planter. Vikram knelt, drew the black, glowing seed from his pouch, and buried it deep in the soil. Miles away, Reyansh felt the connection spark. Grow, Reyansh commanded. In the hospital lobby, the earth in the planter exploded. The survivors screamed and scrambled backward as a sapling erupted from the dirt. It didn't grow slowly, it violently expanded, twisting and winding toward the ceiling in seconds. Its bark was the same obsidian ironwood as Reyansh, and its leaves glowed with that same, pure emerald light. As the sub-branch matured, reaching the second floor of the lobby, a shockwave of purifying, level 1 safe zone mana washed over the hospital. The oppressive, chaotic alien energy was instantly banished. The wounds on the survivors stopped bleeding. Sub-branch established, hospital district. Territory expanded. Host gains plus 50 all stats. Teleportation route gate online. The roots of the massive sapling shifted, forming a glowing, circular wooden archway in the center of the room. Inside the archway, a shimmering green portal hummed with spatial magic. Through the portal, the survivors could see the safe, peaceful courtyard of the Reyansh estate. Vikram turned to the terrified doctors and patients. He pointed his blood-stained sword toward the glowing portal. Step through, Vikram commanded, his voice filled with unquestionable authority. The apocalypse rules the streets. But within the shade of the ancestral tree, humanity will survive. Swear your blood to the roots, and you will never know fear again. One by one, weeping with relief, the 100 survivors stumbled through the portal, leaving the nightmare of the hospital behind. Deep beneath the city, Reyansh's massive root network pulsed with unimaginable power, feeding on the faith of 100 new souls. The first seed was planted. The Yggdrasil Empire had officially staked its claim on the earth. Chapter 21, The First Congregation. The shimmering green portal in the center of the courtyard pulsed like a beating heart. One by one, the survivors from the hospital stumbled through, falling to their knees on the cool, pristine cobblestones of the Reyansh estate. Behind them, the portal showed the blood-slicked, shattered ruins of the city. But here, bathed in the luminescent emerald glow of Reyansh's massive canopy, there was only peace. The chaotic, suffocating pressure of the apocalypse was gone, replaced by a pure, oxygen-rich sanctuary that smelled of ancient pine and rain. We're alive, a nurse whispered, pressing her tear-streaked face against the stone, openly sobbing. Deep within his ironwood core, Reyansh felt a tidal wave of golden energy wash over him. Faith energy surging. Current, 640/1000 milestone reached, congregation of 100 souls. Title unlocked, Sanctuary Provider. Passive healing within territory increased by 20%. Vikram stepped through the portal last, his crimson-stained sword resting on his shoulder. He looked at the huddled, terrified masses, then up at the towering obsidian trunk of his ancestor. Listen to me. Vikram's magically amplified voice rolled over the courtyard, instantly silencing the weeping. You have been pulled from the maw of hell by the grace of the ancestral tree. This is not a refugee camp. This is the seed of a new empire. If you wish to stay in the shade of the canopy, you must earn it. He pointed his blade toward the massive roots breaching the earth around the tree's base. The blood of my family waters the inner branch. We are the sword and the shield. You, the survivors, shall become the outer branch. Offer your blood to the roots. Bind your souls to the tree. In return, you will be granted classes, strength, and life. Refuse, and you will be escorted back into the streets. It was a harsh ultimatum, born of a brutal new world. But for people who had just watched tech goblins butcher their friends, it was no choice at all. Led by the bloody-coated doctor, the survivors lined up. They scavenged sharp stones and broken glass, cutting their palms and pressing them against the pale, vein-like roots that rose to meet them. The courtyard flashed with 100 consecutive bursts of light. The mass awakening wasn't as potent as the bloodline pact. They were outsiders, lacking the Reyansh genetic resonance, but the results were still miraculous. Crippled patients stood on healed legs. Timid nurses awakened as verdant healers. Janitors bulked up into stone-fisted brawlers. Reyansh absorbed the cascading microstats. It was a deluge of power. His trunk thickened, his roots dug deeper, and his consciousness expanded to blanket the entire estate and the hospital miles away. The Yggdrasil Empire had gained its first citizens. The long night of survival was over. The dawn of conquest had begun. Chapter 22, The Arsenal of Yggdrasil. 3 days passed. The estate transformed from a ruined mansion into a bustling, militarized fortress. The outer branch survivors worked tirelessly, fortifying the walls, setting up triage centers, and organizing scouting parties. But as Vikram prepared to send teams out to secure food caches, a glaring problem became evident. They had the stats, but they lacked the gear. A Tier 1 brawler punching a mutated beast was still going to break their knuckles. A scavenged kitchen knife would shatter against an orc's hide. Reyansh, observing his growing army through his ethereal senses, realized his family needed an arsenal. He pulled up his system interface, his SP sitting comfortably at 3,200 after devouring the hospital's alien corpses. He didn't need to buy weapons from the system store. He was the weapon. As a Tier 2 Ironwood Guardian, his wood was denser than titanium and pulsed with highly conductive mana. He funneled his intelligence and his deep connection to the earth into a single, massive root that breached the center of the courtyard. The survivors stopped their work, watching in awe as the thick black root began to twist and braid itself like warm taffy. Reyansh focused his immense willpower, acting as the blacksmith of his own body. He splintered the wood, forcing the fibers to condense, sharpen, and align. Sparks of green mana flew into the air like strikes from a hammer. Within minutes, the root snapped, depositing a dozen masterfully crafted weapons onto the cobblestones. There were longbows with bowstrings spun from Reyansh's own fibrous sap. There were curved sabers, pitch black and razor sharp, humming with kinetic energy. And for Vikram, there was a masterpiece, a massive, two-handed greatsword carved from the absolute core of Reyansh's ironwood, perfectly balanced and nearly indestructible. Vikram approached the pile reverently. He picked up the greatsword. The moment his hands wrapped around the hilt, his crimson aura flared violently, syncing perfectly with the monoconductive wood. He gave it a single, experimental swing. The blade cleaved the air with a terrifying shriek, leaving a vacuum trail in its wake. Ironwood, Vikram whispered, his eyes wide. It is lighter than steel, but harder than diamond. Kavya picked up a new staff, its head twisting into a natural, jagged crescent. Ancestor, you spoil us. I arm you, Reyansh's voice rumbled in their minds. The hospital was only the beginning. The city is drowning. Go forth. Break the tide. Armed with the arsenal of Yggdrasil, the hunting parties stepped through the portals. They weren't surviving anymore. They were exterminating. Chapter 23, The Warlord of Ash. While the Reyansh family expanded their territory, clearing blocks and planting 2 more sub-branch seeds in strategic locations, they were not the only humans who had adapted to the apocalypse. In the industrial sector of the city, a different kind of empire was rising, one built on terror, fire, and gasoline. Kalen was a former cartel enforcer who had been lucky enough to awaken a rare and devastating class on the first day of the integration, Tier 2, Inferno Tyrant. He hadn't built a sanctuary, he had built a warband. The Ash Riders. Riding in heavily modified, spiked armored trucks, Kalen's men scoured the city, enslaving weaker humans and burning the rest. When his scouts reported a miraculous, glowing green tree growing inside the district hospital and the rumors of a magical portal that led to an absolute safe zone, Kalen's greed ignited. On the morning of the 4th day, the roar of massive diesel engines shattered the silence of the hospital district. 5 armored trucks smashed through the abandoned cars in the street, screeching to a halt outside the hospital's shattered glass doors. Kalen stepped out of the lead vehicle. He was a massive brute of a man, his skin covered in glowing, ember-like tattoos. In his hands, he wielded 2 massive, chained meat cleavers that dripped with liquid fire. Listen up, you tree-hugging cowards. Kalen's voice boomed, magically amplified by his class. He hurled a severed, charred human head through the hospital doors. It rolled across the icy linoleum Kavya had frozen days ago. Inside the hospital, a squad of Reyansh outer branch guards, mostly Tier 1 brawlers and rogues, drew their ironwood weapons, their hands shaking. They were brave, but the oppressive heat radiating from the Inferno Tyrant was suffocating. I know about your little portal, Kalen sneered, stepping into the lobby, his boots melting the frost. His Ash Riders flooded in behind him, aiming scavenged assault rifles and crossbows at the guards. I'm taking this territory. I'm taking your magic portal. And I'm going to burn that pretty little tree to the roots. Surrender, or burn. Before the outer branch guards could react, the shimmering green portal beneath the sub-branch flared violently. A massive figure stepped through the light. It was Vikram, clad in full ironwood armor, dragging his massive, black greatsword across the tiles. Behind him stepped Kavya, the air temperature immediately plummeting as her blue eyes locked onto the warlord. The only thing burning today, Vikram said, his voice cold as the grave, is your arrogance. Chapter 24, Fire and Wood. Kalen laughed, a booming, arrogant sound. He looked at Vikram's armor and sword. Wood? You brought wood to fight an Inferno Tyrant? I'm going to turn you into ash, old man. Kalen roared, his ember tattoos flaring blindingly bright. He swung his chained meat cleavers in a wide arc. A massive wave of highly condensed, roaring magical fire erupted from the blades, rushing toward Vikram like a tsunami. Father! Kavya yelled, raising her staff to summon an ice wall. No. Save your mana, Vikram commanded calmly. Vikram didn't dodge. He didn't raise a shield. He stepped directly into the inferno, bringing his ironwood greatsword up in a vertical guard. The fire crashed over him, completely engulfing the patriarch. The Ash Riders cheered, expecting to see charred bones. But as the flames parted, Vikram stood completely unharmed. The ironwood armor didn't even have a scorch mark on it. Reyansh's wood, forged with Tier 2 mana and extreme density, was fundamentally immune to mundane and low-tier magical fire. It simply absorbed the heat and dissipated it into the earth. Kalen's grin vanished. What the hell are you? I am the first branch, Vikram growled. He moved with blinding speed, a crimson blur of aura night agility. He crossed the lobby in a heartbeat, bringing the flat of his heavy ironwood blade smashing into Kalen's chest. The impact sounded like a car crash. Kalen's ribs shattered, and the warlord was launched backward, crashing through the hospital doors and tumbling out into the street. Kill them! Kalen screamed, vomiting blood on the asphalt. The Ash Riders opened fire. Bullets ricocheted uselessly off Vikram's armor. Kavya stepped out of the portal, slamming her staff down. A massive shockwave of jagged ice erupted from the ground, impaling 2 of the armored trucks and freezing half the Ash Riders to the pavement in an instant. Kalen, desperate and furious, forced himself to his feet. He began to channel every ounce of his Tier 2 mana, his skin cracking to reveal blinding white light beneath. He was preparing to self-destruct, to take the entire hospital block down in a localized nuclear fireball. If I can't have it, nobody can. Kalen shrieked. Through the sub-branch, Reyansh felt the massive spike in unstable mana. Enough, Reyansh thought. Time to show the mortals what a god can do. Chapter 25, The Sovereign's Decree. Reyansh did not send another weapon. He did not send stats. He sent his very presence. Deep within the Reyansh estate, the massive Ironwood Guardian pulsed. Reyansh channeled a fraction of his soul directly through the ley line, bypassing distance and projected his consciousness out of the hospital sub-branch. In the street outside the hospital, the air pressure suddenly magnified to a crushing degree. The remaining Ash Riders collapsed to their knees, gasping for air as if gravity had just been multiplied by 10. The concrete beneath Kalen's feet violently exploded. 4 massive, pitch-black roots, as thick as ancient oak trunks, erupted from the street. They moved with terrifying, serpentine speed, wrapping around Kalen's arms and legs before he could unleash his fiery explosion. The roots hoisted the massive warlord 10 feet into the air, spreading him out like a man on a medieval rack. Kalen screamed, his flames flaring against the wood, but the ironwood absorbed his Tier 2 fire like a sponge drinking water. The sky above the street darkened as an ethereal, translucent projection of Reyansh's massive canopy manifested in the air, casting the entire block in a deep, terrifying emerald shadow. A voice, ancient, vast, and vibrating with cosmic authority, echoed directly into the minds of every human present. You boast of fire, mortal. But fire consumes itself, leaving only ash. Wood endures. Wood rebuilds. Wood conquers. Kalen struggled, his eyes wide with absolute, primal terror as he stared up at the ghostly canopy. What are you? I am the root of this world, Reyansh's voice thundered. And you are a weed. With a sickening crack, the roots pulled taut. They didn't tear Kalen apart, not yet. Instead, a single, needle-thin root extended from the bundle, piercing directly into Kalen's chest, hovering millimeters above his beating heart. I do not waste resources, Reyansh declared. Your gang is broken. Your life is forfeit. But your strength has uses. I plant this seed in your heart. You will serve the Yggdrasil Empire as the vanguard of Ash. Disobey Vikram, harm my bloodline, or attempt to flee, and the seed will blossom, tearing you apart from the inside out. Do you submit? Kalen, the terrifying inferno tyrant who had burned a dozen city blocks, wept openly. The crushing aura of the Tier 2 tree was breaking his sanity. I submit. Kalen screamed, the fire in his tattoos dying out completely. I submit to the tree. The roots released him, dropping the broken warlord to the pavement. The remaining Ash Riders immediately threw down their weapons, pressing their foreheads to the asphalt in total surrender. Vikram walked forward, looking down at the defeated warlord. He didn't smile. He simply pointed his ironwood sword back toward the hospital. Get up, dog, Vikram ordered. The ancestor requires labor. You have a lot of rubble to clear. In the estate, Reyansh withdrew his projection, a deep sense of satisfaction settling in his core. He hadn't just defeated a rival human faction, he had subjugated them. His army was growing. The city was almost his. But as he looked toward the bleeding rifts in the sky, he knew the war against the stars was only just beginning. Chapter 26, The Roots of Industry. The subjugation of the Ash Riders marked a turning point in the apocalypse. Survival was no longer the primary objective of the Reyansh family, industry was. Under the cold, uncompromising gaze of Vikram and his crimson aura greatsword, the once terrifying Ash Riders were stripped of their armored trucks and put to work. Stripped to the waist, their ember tattoos dull and flickering, Kalen's men became the heavy laborers of the Yggdrasil Empire. They dragged away the husks of burned-out cars, cleared the rubble from the streets connecting the hospital to the estate, and hauled massive blocks of concrete to reinforce the perimeter walls. Whenever an Ash Rider thought of resting, or perhaps rebelling, they would look up and see the sprawling, luminescent emerald canopy of a sub-branch towering over the district. And they would remember the feeling of the ancestral tree's crushing gravity. Deep within the central courtyard, Reyansh was experiencing an unprecedented period of gluttony. With over 400 outer branch members hunting, scavenging, and clearing the city, the symbiosis system was running raw, unadulterated numbers into his core every second of the day. Host gains plus 12 strength from outer branch. Host gains plus 8 agility from descendant Aryan. Host gains plus 15 intelligence from descendant Kavya. Faith energy, 2,500/5,000. He was overflowing with power. The ley lines beneath the city pumped cold, pure liquid mana into his ironwood veins, expanding his root network until it webbed beneath almost a third of the entire metropolis. He was planting sub-branches in every conquered zone, parks, high schools, subway terminals, creating a massive, interconnected neural network of safe zones. It was time to elevate his generals. Using his accumulated thousands of system points, Reyansh began bestowing class advancements. Vikram, who had fought tirelessly on the front lines, felt a sudden, volcanic eruption of heat in his chest. His crimson aura darkened to a deep, royal burgundy. The system advanced him from an aura knight to a tier 2, blood iron vanguard, allowing him to manipulate the iron in the blood of his enemies. Kavya's frost mage class evolved into tier 2, glacial sovereign. She no longer needed to cast individual spells. Simply breathing lowered the ambient temperature of a room, and with a wave of her hand, she could summon localized blizzards capable of shredding flesh from bone. The family was ascending. The city was stabilizing. But Reyansh, whose consciousness now stretched across the sky, felt a change in the atmospheric pressure. The spatial rifts, the bleeding crimson tears that had hovered silently in the heavens since the integration began, were beginning to widen. The vanguard of mindless monsters was over. The true architects of the apocalypse were arriving. Chapter 27, Eyes in the Sky. It happened at high noon on the 7th day. The sun was entirely blotted out, not by clouds, but by a shadow so impossibly vast it plunged the entire city back into twilight. Vikram, inspecting the newly fortified barricades at the edge of their territory with Kalan, looked up. The crimson rifts in the sky had merged into a single, massive, churning vortex of dark matter. Slowly, descending from the abyss, came a vessel. It was not a sleek, aerodynamic spaceship from a science fiction movie. It was a brutal, monolithic nightmare. It looked like a floating, inverted pyramid constructed of dark, jagged asteroid rock and pulsing, fleshy purple veins. It was the size of a small mountain, easily spanning 2 miles across, held aloft by anti-gravity thrusters that hummed with a sound that rattled the teeth in Vikram's skull. Warning, catastrophic threat detected. Entity, Tier 3 Veyran Harvester Mothership. Objective, core extraction and biological harvesting. Panic, raw and contagious, swept through the outer branch. The survivors who had just begun to feel safe dropped their tools, falling to their knees in absolute despair. How could swords and ice fight a floating mountain? What in the burning hell is that? Kalan whispered, his ember tattoos flaring defensively, his eyes wide with terror. He gripped his chained meat cleavers, but for the first time in his life, the Inferno Tyrant felt entirely powerless. The end of the tutorial, Vikram said grimly, his hand tightening around his ironwood greatsword. Within the central estate, Reyansh felt the immense, suffocating gravitational pull of the Harvester Mothership. He could sense the thousands of alien life forms swarming inside its rocky hull. They hadn't come to conquer, they had come to strip mine the planet's ley lines and harvest the biomass of humanity. A single, blinding purple spotlight erupted from the bottom of the pyramid, sweeping across the ruined city. Where the light touched, buildings crumbled into dust, their raw matter sucked upward into the ship's maw. The light swept toward the hospital district. It swept toward the Reyansh estate. It stopped. The aliens had detected the anomaly. A massive concentration of pure, uncorrupted ley line mana, guarded by a dense forest of ironwood. Prepare yourselves, Reyansh's voice echoed in the minds of every living soul within his territory. The tone was not panicked. It was as hard and cold as an anvil. They want my roots. They will have to dig for them. Chapter 28, The Canopy Shield. The Veyran Harvester didn't bother sending ground troops. To them, the Yggdrasil Empire was just a stubborn patch of weeds growing over a rich mineral deposit. They opted for eradication. The bottom tip of the inverted pyramid began to separate, revealing a massive, glowing core of hypercondensed plasma. The humming of the anti-gravity thrusters grew into a deafening, metallic shriek that shattered glass across the city. Brace! Vikram roared, slamming his greatsword into the pavement to anchor himself. Kavya pointed her staff toward the sky, funneling every ounce of her Tier 2 mana into a massive, shimmering dome of ice above the estate, but she knew it wouldn't be enough. High above, the harvester fired. A pillar of blinding, violet annihilation shot downward. It was a beam of pure, destructive orbital energy, wide enough to vaporize the entire Reyansh estate and the surrounding 3 city blocks in a single microsecond. But Reyansh was ready. He had spent the last 3 days gorging on stats, SP, and faith. He was sitting at the absolute pinnacle of Tier 2. Evolution condition forced. Ascending from Tier 2, Ironwood Guardian, to Tier 3, Mana Canopy. Deep beneath the earth, Reyansh's root network clamped onto the subterranean ley line like a vice. He didn't just tap it, he drained it. Millions of gallons of raw, liquid mana rushed up his obsidian trunk. Reyansh's physical form underwent a violent, glorious metamorphosis. The iron-black bark split apart, revealing veins of glowing, crystalline blue mana pulsing just beneath the surface. His canopy didn't just grow, it exploded outward. The thousands of emerald leaves multiplied into millions, transforming into semi-translucent, crystalline constructs that shimmered like a sea of diamonds. The violet beam of annihilation struck. But it didn't hit Kavya's ice. It hit the aegis of Yggdrasil. A colossal, hemispherical dome of pure, solid emerald energy projected from Reyansh's canopy, covering not just the estate, but the entire 3-mile radius of their conquered territory. Boom! The sound of the impact defied description. It was the sound of a sun cracking open. The sky turned into a blinding wash of violent purple and serene green. The shockwave leveled every abandoned skyscraper outside the dome, flattening the city into a wasteland of dust. Inside the dome, the family watched in absolute, breathless awe. The violet beam washed over the emerald shield like water splitting around a boulder. The shield groaned, spider web cracks forming at the point of impact, but Reyansh continuously pumped ley line mana into the barrier, sealing the cracks instantly. For 10 agonizing seconds, the harvester poured its entire payload into the shield. Then, the beam abruptly cut off. The ship's weapons systems needed to recharge. The city outside the dome was gone, reduced to a smoking, glass-flat crater. But inside, the grass was still green. The air was still sweet. They have emptied their lungs, Reyansh's ancient, vibrating voice echoed through the domain. Now, it is our turn. Chapter 29, The Skyward Strike. A shield doesn't win a war. Kalen shouted, staring up at the massive, rocky underbelly of the mothership hovering 2 miles above them. How the hell do we kill a mountain in the sky? We climb, Vikram said, his eyes glowing with Tier 2 blood iron aura. Deep beneath the courtyard, Reyansh shifted his strategy. The shield was holding, but it was consuming massive amounts of mana. He couldn't play defense forever. The aliens needed to be eradicated from the inside out. Vikram. Kalen. Kavya. Shadows. To the trunk. The elite strike team of the Yggdrasil Empire sprinted back to the central courtyard. They stood at the base of Reyansh's newly crystallized, pulsing trunk. What's the plan, Ancestor? Vikram asked, raising his blade. Reyansh didn't answer with words. He answered with the earth. The ground 15 feet away from the main trunk violently ruptured. A new route not meant for defense, but for transportation erupted from the soil. It was 20 feet thick, flat on top like a massive wooden platform, and plated in indestructible ironwood. The strike team stepped onto the platform. Hold your breath, Reyansh commanded. With the explosive force of a ballistic missile, the massive root shot upward. It didn't just grow, it launched. Propelled by the sheer, unadulterated force of Reyansh's Tier 3 vitality and the raw pressure of the ley line. The towering pillar of wood punched through the emerald shield and rocketed into the sky at supersonic speeds. The G-force was crushing. Kavya screamed, dropping to her knees and encasing herself in a thin layer of ice to keep her organs from rupturing. Vikram and Kalen stood side by side, their respective crimson and fiery auras flaring to protect their bodies from the intense wind shear. The 2-mile gap closed in seconds. The root pillar slammed directly into the underbelly of the Veyron harvester. The impact sheared through the rocky outer hull, crushing the anti-gravity plating and piercing deep into the metallic, fleshy interior of the mothership. The platform came to a grinding, shuddering halt inside a massive, cavernous loading bay filled with flashing red alarms and screeching alien sirens. We're in, Vikram breathed, stepping off the wooden platform onto the cold, metallic floor of the alien vessel. Kalen stepped off next, his twin-chained meat cleavers igniting with roaring Tier 2 hellfire. A manic, bloodthirsty grin split his face. Oh, I am going to enjoy this. From the shadows of the loading bay, hundreds of glowing, multi-optic eyes appeared. The Veyron vanguard 8 foot tall, multi-limbed monstrosities armed with plasma halberds charged the intruders. For the Ancestor, Kavya whispered, raising her staff. The invasion had begun. Chapter 30, Heart of the Hive. The interior of the Veyron harvester was a slaughterhouse in reverse. The alien vanguard rushed forward, expecting to overwhelm the fragile human intruders with sheer numbers and advanced plasma weaponry. They had severely underestimated the stats of a Tier 3 symbiosis loop. Kalen became a whirlwind of destruction. The Inferno Tyrant spun his chained cleavers in massive, fiery arcs, turning the confined metallic hallways into an oven. Alien armor melted to slag, flesh turned to ash before they could even swing their halberds. The explosive seed Reyansh had planted in Kalen's heart pumped the warlord full of the tree's boundless stamina, turning his previous limits into mere suggestions. Behind him, Kavya acted as the perfect counterbalance. Whenever the aliens attempted to vent the heat or flank them through maintenance shafts, she sealed the corridors with walls of absolute zero, freezing entire squads of reinforcements into brittle, shattered statues. But it was Vikram who carved the path forward. His blood iron vanguard class allowed him to sense the biological fluid pumping through the alien ship because the ship wasn't just metal, it was partly organic. Vikram didn't just cut, he manipulated the very blood of the ship, forcing bulkheads to rupture and blast doors to tear themselves apart from the inside. They carved their way to the center of the pyramid, bursting into a massive, spherical chamber. In the center of the room, suspended in a web of purple energy tethers, was the ship's core, a massive, beating, crystalline heart radiating horrific amounts of chaotic mana. Guarding it was the Veyron commander. Threat detected, Tier 3 Veyron Harvester Lord. The commander was 12 feet tall, clad in shifting, liquid metal armor, wielding a massive, dual-bladed staff of pure, humming plasma. You dare soil this vessel, anomalies, the commander hissed, its voice translating directly into their minds. It blurred forward, faster than Kalen could track. The plasma staff swung in a lethal arc, aiming to bisect the Inferno Tyrant. Clang! Vikram intercepted the strike. His ironwood greatsword clashed against the plasma, the hyperdense wood shrieking but holding firm. The kinetic backlash cracked the metal flooring beneath Vikram's boots. Kavya. The core. Vikram roared, struggling against the commander's immense strength. Kavya sprinted past the duel, aiming her staff at the massive, beating crystal heart. But as she prepared to cast, she felt a familiar, ancient presence in her mind. Do not freeze it, child. Plant me. Kavya blinked. She reached into her pouch, pulling out a small, jagged black acorn, a sub-branch seed Reyansh had subtly slipped into her pocket before the launch. With a fierce cry, Kavya slammed the seed directly into the biological mass surrounding the glowing purple core. Miles below, Reyansh grinned in his wooden mind. Parasitic sub-branch planted. Commencing hostile takeover. The black seed exploded. Roots didn't grow outward, they burrowed inward, viciously tearing into the ship's core. The crystalline heart shrieked, its purple light rapidly shifting to a blinding, violent emerald green. Reyansh wasn't just destroying the ship, he was eating it. The Veyran commander froze, dropping its plasma staff as the liquid metal armor around its body suddenly shut down. The ship's power grid was failing. Impossible. It gurgled. Vikram didn't hesitate. With a clean, brutal upward swing, the Crimson Greatsword decapitated the Tier 3 commander. Hostile core consumed. Gained, 25,000 SP passive mana increased by 300%. The ship is falling. Kalen yelled as the gravity plating failed, sending them floating into the air. I have you, Reyansh's voice soothed. The massive root that had pierced the ship's hull rapidly expanded, weaving a massive, bowl-shaped net of ironwood beneath a falling 2-mile-wide pyramid. With groaning, earth-shattering effort, Reyansh caught the crashing mothership, lowering it gently into the flattened wasteland just outside his shield dome. The city was silent once more. The massive alien vessel sat dead in the dirt, wrapped entirely in the glowing, victorious roots of the world tree. The tutorial was truly over. Earth had survived the first wave, and Reyansh had claimed his first spaceship. The stars were next. Chapter 31, The Spoils of War. The silence that followed the crash of the Veyran harvester was deafening. The 2-mile-wide alien mothership rested in the dust of the flattened city, held firmly in the cradle of Reyansh's massive ironwood roots. Inside the ship's core chamber, gravity had returned to normal, though the sterile, humming purple lights of the alien vessel had been entirely replaced by the warm, pulsing emerald glow of Reyansh's sub-branch. Vikram wiped the black blood of the Veyran commander from his greatsword, his chest heaving. Kalen leaned against a metallic bulkhead, his flames dying down to a comfortable smolder, laughing breathlessly. We just hijacked a mountain, Kalen chuckled, shaking his head. A flying, alien mountain. Deep within the earth, Reyansh was processing a terrifying amount of data. The parasitic sub-branch hadn't just consumed the ship's mana core, it had tapped into the vessel's databanks. A flood of cosmic knowledge rushed into Reyansh's expanded Tier 3 consciousness. Decryption complete, Veyran star map acquired. Decryption complete, Universal Language Matrix acquired. Integration protocol initiated. Fusing ironwood with Veyran biosteel. Reyansh saw the universe for what it truly was. The Great Integration wasn't a localized event, it was a multiversal overlap. Earth's dimensional barrier had collapsed, exposing it to the dark forest of the cosmos. The Veyran Empire was just a mid-tier scavenging fleet, harvesting newborn planets for Ramana. There were thousands of empires out there. Trillions of beings. And they were all hungry. The sky is not the limit, Reyansh's voice echoed in the minds of his strike team. It is the shoreline of a very dark, very deep ocean. And we need a ship. Before their eyes, the interior of the core chamber began to change. Reyansh's roots, infused with the ship's biosteel, began to grow rapidly along the walls, fusing wood and metal into a seamless, organic alloy. The cold, jagged alien architecture smoothed out, replaced by elegant, sweeping curves of dark ironwood laced with glowing green circuitry. Ancestor. Kavya whispered, touching the newly formed wall. It felt like living, breathing steel. I am taking control of this vessel. It will no longer harvest life. It will protect it. Return to the estate. We have an empire to build before the rest of the universe notices we survived. With a thought, Reyansh spent a fraction of his 25,000 SP to instantly construct a root gate portal in the core room, allowing his exhausted, victorious generals to step back into the sunlit courtyard of their home. Chapter 32, The Yggdrasil Citadel. 6 months passed. The apocalypse outside their borders raged on, but within the territory of the ancestral tree, humanity thrived. The Reyansh estate was no longer a crumbling mansion. It was the Yggdrasil Citadel. Using the combined labor of the Ash Riders, the Outer Branch, and Reyansh's unparalleled control over the earth, a massive, ringed city had been constructed around the central courtyard. Walls of pure, impenetrable ironwood, 80 feet high and thick as bank vaults, protected 50,000 survivors they had rescued from across the continent. At the edge of the city sat the retrofitted Veyran harvester. It no longer looked like a jagged rock. Reyansh had completely overgrown it, shaping it into a majestic, floating fortress of obsidian wood and emerald sails that drank ambient mana from the air. Reyansh himself had reached the absolute zenith of his power. Milestone reached, 50,000 souls bound. Territory expansion, 1,000 square miles. Evolution condition met. Ascending from Tier 3, Mana Canopy, to Tier 4, Territory Sovereign. The evolution shook the continent. Reyansh's central trunk expanded to the size of a skyscraper, his canopy piercing the clouds, visible from hundreds of miles away. His roots no longer just tapped the local ley line, they possessed it. He could feel the heartbeat of the entire Asian continent. But with this vast new awareness came a terrifying discovery. Vikram, Reyansh summoned his patriarch. Vikram stepped onto the central observation deck of the citadel. He wore armor forged from the ship's biosteel and Reyansh's Tier 4 wood. He looked like a king of myth. The ley lines to the south are dying, Reyansh rumbled, his voice shaking the leaves around them. Something in the Indian Ocean is consuming the planet's lifeblood at an accelerated rate. It is pulling the mana away from the continent. If it drains the ocean's core, the earth will shatter. Vikram frowned, resting his hand on his greatsword. Another alien ship. No. This belongs to Earth. The integration mutated the oceans faster than the land. It is a Tier 4 cataclysm beast. A Leviathan. And it is moving toward the coast. Vikram looked up at the massive, retrofitted mothership hovering silently above the city. Then it is time we test the armada. Chapter 33, The Abyssal Tide. The coastline was a nightmare of chaotic, churning black water. The skies above the ocean wept toxic, acidic rain. The waves, hundreds of feet high, battered the ruined remains of human coastal cities. But the waves were not driven by the wind, they were displaced by the sheer mass of the creature moving beneath them. Standing on the bridge of the Emerald Sovereign, the newly christened mothership Kavya stared at the tactical display, which was a fusion of alien holograms and glowing magical runes. Target is 30 miles off the coast and closing, Kavya reported, her hands flying over the organic controls. Mana density is, off the charts. It's a walking natural disaster. Kalen stood at the weapons console, cracking his knuckles, his tattoos blazing. Let the big fish come. I've been itching to melt something. Vikram sat in the captain's chair, his hands resting on two glowing orbs of ironwood that directly connected his mind to Reyansh's vast consciousness. Though Reyansh remained rooted in the citadel hundreds of miles away, the ship was Reyansh. Every plank of wood, every glowing green circuit, was a physical extension of the ancestral tree. Bring us down into the clouds, Vikram ordered calmly. Charge the main bow cannons. Kavya, prepare to freeze the sea. We cannot let that tidal wave hit the mainland. The Emerald Sovereign descended through the storm clouds. The ship was a terrifying fusion of nature and technology. Massive, humming anti-gravity rings, coated in ironwood, kept it aloft, while thousands of crystalline leaves acted as solar sails, drinking the storm's lightning to charge their weapons. As they broke through the cloud cover, the ocean erupted. The Leviathan breached. It was a creature that defied sanity, a colossal, mutated amalgamation of a deep-sea anglerfish and a kraken. It was 3 miles long. Its scales were thick, jagged plates of obsidian rock. Tentacles thicker than skyscrapers thrashed the water into a frenzy, and a glowing, hypnotic lure the size of a small moon hung over its massive, gaping maw. Target identified, Tier 4 Abyssal Leviathan, Cataclysm Beast. The beast roared, a sound that bypassed the ears and vibrated directly in the human soul. A shockwave of pure, destructive water mana shot toward the coastline in the form of a 300-foot tsunami. Now, Kavya! Vikram roared. Chapter 34, The Green Armada. Kavya didn't cast a spell from her staff. She channeled her Tier 2 glacial sovereign power directly into the ship's amplification matrix. Absolute Zero Engine, engage, she screamed. From the underbelly of the Emerald Sovereign, a massive, rotating array of ironwood cannons deployed. But they didn't fire plasma. They fired pure, hypercondensed glacial magic. A wide beam of blinding blue light struck the crest of the incoming tsunami. The effect was instantaneous and apocalyptic. The 300-foot wave froze solid in midair, creating a towering, jagged wall of ice that stretched for miles along the coastline. The kinetic force of the wave shattered against its own frozen mass, saving the mainland from total annihilation. The Leviathan shrieked in rage, its massive, glowing lure pulsing violently. It turned its multi-eyed gaze toward the floating wooden fortress in the sky. 6 tentacles, dripping with corrosive black sea water, shot upward like organic missiles, aiming to drag the ship out of the sky. Kalen! Burn the limbs! Vikram commanded. With pleasure. Kalen slammed his fists into his console. The ship's side batteries opened. Reyansh's ironwood had absorbed Kalen's Inferno Tyrant-class attributes, refining them into heavy artillery. A barrage of condensed, screaming hellfire meteors rained down from the ship. The meteors struck the rising tentacles. The water flashed to steam instantly. The Tier 4 beast shrieked as its flesh was scorched, the thick, rubbery limbs recoiling back into the boiling ocean. But the beast was not deterred. Its massive jaws unhinged, revealing rows of teeth the size of buildings. A swirling vortex of highly pressurized, chaotic mana began to gather deep within its throat. It was preparing a breath attack, a hyper-pressurized water cutter capable of slicing the Emerald Sovereign in half. It is drawing from the ocean's core, Reyansh's voice echoed urgently in the bridge. If it fires, the ship's shields will not hold. I must anchor it. How? Vikram yelled over the alarms. We are miles above the water. I am the territory sovereign, Reyansh rumbled. The earth obeys me. And the ocean floor is still earth. Chapter 35, Continental Sovereign. Miles below the churning, boiling surface of the ocean, the seabed began to tremble. Reyansh, channeling the absolute maximum output of his Tier 4 ley line connection, pushed his subterranean route network beyond the edge of the continent. Millions of miles of hair-thin rootlets surged beneath the continental shelf, weaving together, compounding in density, until they formed 4 massive, spear-like pillars of ironwood. Just as the Leviathan reared its head back to unleash its devastating breath attack, the ocean floor erupted. The 4 ironwood pillars shot upward through the black water at terrifying speeds. They breached the surface like the fingers of a buried titan, slamming into the Leviathan's massive body. The beast gurgled in shock as the roots wrapped around its thick torso, pinning its thrashing tentacles to its sides. The sheer, unyielding kinetic force of Reyansh's Tier 4 roots hauled the 3-mile-long monster halfway out of the water, suspending it in the air beneath the ship. It's pinned. Kalen roared. Main cannons. No, Vikram said, stepping away from the captain's chair. He drew his crimson glowing greatsword, his blood iron aura flaring so brightly it illuminated the bridge. Cannons will destroy the core. The ancestor needs to eat. Vikram walked to the edge of the bridge, stepping out onto the open-air observation deck. The wind howled around him, tearing at his cloak. Below him, the massive beast struggled against the roots, its open maw directly beneath the ship. Vikram took a deep breath, gripped his sword with both hands, and leaped off the ship. He fell for thousands of feet like a crimson meteor. He manipulated his own blood to accelerate his descent, breaking the sound barrier. He aimed himself perfectly, plunging directly into the Leviathan's gaping, terrifying maw. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, a blinding flash of crimson light erupted from within the beast's chest. Vikram, using his absolute mastery over blood and iron, had struck the creature's massive heart from the inside. The Leviathan unleashed a final, world-shaking death rattle, its body going limp in the grasp of the ironwood roots. Deep beneath the earth, Reyansh opened his maw. Devour activated. Absorbing Tier 4 Abyssal Leviathan, Cataclysm Core consumed. Gained, 250,000 SP. New element acquired, Abyssal Water Manipulation. Global threat neutralized. Vikram, covered in thick, glowing blue blood, carved his way out of the beast's neck and landed safely on one of Reyansh's thick roots. He looked up at the Emerald Sovereign, then further up, past the dark storm clouds, toward the bleeding rifts in the sky that were steadily growing larger. The earth is ours, Reyansh's voice echoed across the frozen coastline, vibrating with newfound, terrifying power. But the dark forest knows we are here. Gather the troops, Vikram. It is time we take the fight to the stars. Chapter 36, The World Core. The Abyssal Leviathan was dead, but digesting a creature 3 miles long with the mass of a small mountain took time. For 3 days, the global storm ceased. The oceans lay eerily still, as if holding their breath, while Reyansh's massive subterranean root network pumped the beast's rich, chaotic mana into his core. The 250,000 system points were just the beginning. The true prize was the Cataclysm Core, a dense, crystalline organ that held the very essence of the mutated ocean. Within the central courtyard of the Yggdrasil citadel, Reyansh's trunk pulsed with a deep, bioluminescent blue, harmonizing with his signature emerald green. Assimilation complete. Host has synchronized with the oceanic ley lines. Continental control expanded to global control. Warning, host's root network has breached the Earth's mantle. Proximity to the world core detected. Reyansh felt his consciousness plunge deeper than ever before, past bedrock, past subterranean oceans, into the boiling, molten heart of the planet. There, he sensed it, a massive, slumbering sphere of pure, golden creation energy. The world core. It was terrified. The integration was slowly mutating it, and if it corrupted entirely, the planet would explode. Do not fear, Reyansh's vast consciousness soothed, wrapping his deepest, most heat-resistant roots around the golden sphere like a protective cradle. I am the anchor. As Reyansh bonded with the world core, a shockwave of pure, stabilizing mana washed over the entire globe. The bleeding crimson rifts in the sky, which had plagued Earth since the apocalypse began, suddenly stopped expanding. The chaotic mutations in the wildlife halted. Reyansh had claimed the planet. But in doing so, he had lit a beacon in the dark. High above the atmosphere, the localized spatial rifts violently merged into one massive tear in the fabric of space-time. The sky above the citadel darkened in the middle of the day. Through the tear poured the true might of the Veyran Empire. It was not a single harvester mothership this time. It was an armada. Dozens of sleek, jagged biosteel cruisers, flanked by massive dreadnoughts, formed a blockade in low Earth orbit. They blotted out the sun, casting a terrifying, jagged shadow over the entire Asian continent. Ancestor. Vikram murmured, standing on the citadel walls, his eyes tracing the thousands of glowing plasma engines in the sky. They brought an army. Then we shall give them a war, Reyansh's voice thundered, shaking the very bedrock of the citadel. Spend your points. Evolve your classes. We are going to the stars. Chapter 37, Seeds of the Armada. The Yggdrasil Empire did not have time to build spaceships rivet by rivet. They had magic, and they had a god of nature. Reyansh accessed his massive treasury of 250,000 SP. He had assimilated the Veyran star maps and their biosteel technology. He knew exactly what he needed to build. He plunged his roots outward, reaching naval shipyards and ruined military bases across the continent. His roots wrapped around the rusted, abandoned husks of aircraft carriers, nuclear submarines, and stealth bombers. Commencing mass transmutation. Deducting 200,000 SP. Across the continent, the metal of the old world groaned and warped. Rusted steel was consumed and replaced by hyper-dense ironwood laced with glowing green circuitry. The nuclear reactors were crushed and replaced by concentrated ley line cores, miniature suns made of condensed mana. Within hours, a fleet of 12 heavily modified, organic star cruisers ripped themselves from dry docks and oceans, floating silently into the air to join the Emerald Sovereign above the citadel. They looked like massive, predatory sharks carved from obsidian, their crystalline leaves unfurling like solar sails to drink the ambient mana. Meanwhile, inside the citadel, the first branch was undergoing its own violent evolution. Using the residual energy from the Leviathan kill, Vikram, Kavya, and Kaelan broke through the mortal limits. Kavya's glacial sovereign class evolved into Tier 3, Void Frost Monarch. Her blue eyes turned completely white, and the air around her warped as she passively froze not just moisture, but the kinetic energy of molecules themselves. Kaelan roared as his ember tattoos turned blinding blue. He ascended to Tier 3, Starfire Tyrant. He no longer threw mundane fire, he generated localized solar flares. And Vikram. Vikram sat in absolute silence in the center of the courtyard, his ironwood greatsword glowing with a terrifying, absolute black light. Descendant Vikram has ascended to Tier 3, Blood Void Vanguard. Symbiosis activated. Host receives massive stat amplification. Vikram stood up. He didn't just manipulate blood anymore. He manipulated space through bloodlines. He looked up at the armada waiting in the sky. He tapped his comms crystal, which was linked directly to every captain in the newly formed Green Armada. All ships, Vikram said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of a planetary executioner. Ascend. Chapter 38, Breaking the Sky. The launch of the Yggdrasil Armada was not a fiery, smoke-filled rocket launch. It was a terrifying display of anti-gravity magic and sheer, brute force mana. 13 massive ironwood vessels shot upward through the atmosphere in perfect synchronization, leaving glowing emerald contrails in their wake. The friction of the atmosphere ignited the air around their deflector shields, turning the ships into rising green comets. Atmosphere breach in 10 seconds, Kavya reported from the bridge of the Emerald Sovereign, her fingers dancing across the biosteel console. Enemy fleet is locking on. They are charging main batteries. Let them lock, Vikram said, standing on the observation deck, looking up as the blue sky faded into the cold, starry blackness of the void. As the Yggdrasil fleet broke through the exosphere, the true scale of the Veyron blockade became apparent. There were over 50 alien cruisers, forming a massive orbital wall. The alien commander, sitting on a dreadnought in the center of the formation, didn't bother offering terms of surrender. He saw the wooden ships rising from the primitive planet and scoffed. Annihilate the anomalies, the alien commander ordered. The void of space lit up. Hundreds of hypercondensed plasma beams shot downward, a rain of purple death aimed directly at the rising wooden fleet. Shields up. Vikram commanded. I am your shield, Reyansh's voice echoed in the wood of the ships. Reyansh, acting from his roots on Earth, channeled the planet's world core directly into the fleet. The crystalline sails on the ironwood cruisers flared blindingly bright. Massive, interlocking emerald shields erupted between the ships, forming a planetary defense grid in the vacuum of space. The plasma beams struck the shields. The void trembled. Space itself rippled with the kinetic backlash, but the ironwood did not splinter. The emerald shields held firm. They survived the volley, the alien commander hissed, leaning forward. Fire again. Too late, Kalen grinned savagely from the weapons console of the Sovereign. Our turn. Eat the sun, you ugly bastards. Kalen channeled his Tier 3 Starfire Tyrant mana directly into the ship's main bow cannon. The ironwood barrel didn't fire a laser. It fired a concentrated, unstable solar flare. The roaring blue sunfire crossed the void in a fraction of a second, slamming directly into the center of the Veyron formation. Chapter 39, The Void Battle. Space is a vacuum. There is no sound, no oxygen to feed a fire. But magical fire does not care about the laws of physics. Kalen's solar flare detonated in the middle of the Veyron blockade. 3 alien cruisers were instantly vaporized, their biosteel hulls melting into glowing slag before they could even register the impact. Panic rippled through the alien formation. They broke their wall, scattering like frightened fish to avoid the splash damage. They're breaking formation. Kavya called out. I'm locking onto their engines. Kavya stood up from her console, raising her Tier 3 frost staff. She didn't shoot ice projectiles, in the cold vacuum of space, she was practically a god. She reached out with her mind, targeting the ambient heat generated by the alien plasma engines. Absolute zero. In the dark void, 10 Veyron cruisers suddenly went dark. The hyperheated plasma in their engines was flash frozen in a microsecond. The sudden, violent shift in temperature caused the biosteel engines to shatter like glass. The ships went adrift, dead in the water. Boarding parties, go. Vikram roared. The Yggdrasil fleet didn't just shoot. They were commanded by a blood void vanguard. Vikram closed his eyes, tapping into the bloodline pact. He could feel the heartbeat of every human soldier on the 13 ironwood ships. He raised his black glowing greatsword and sliced the empty air of the bridge. Space tore open. A massive, glowing red root gate appeared on the bridge of the Emerald Sovereign. Simultaneously, identical portals tore open directly inside the bridges of the crippled Veyron cruisers. Vikram stepped through the portal. He reappeared instantly on the bridge of an alien cruiser, standing amidst a dozen panicked Veyron officers. Before they could raise their plasma pistols, Vikram swung his greatsword. A wave of localized gravity crushed the aliens to the floor, their own blood turning into heavy lead in their veins. All across the blockade, human warriors or knights, shadow walkers, ironhide defenders stepped out of portals directly into the enemy ships, turning a space battle into brutal, close-quarters melee combat. The Veyron Empire prided itself on technological superiority. They had never fought an enemy that used a spaceship as a mere delivery system for a medieval bloodbath. Within 20 minutes, the blockade was utterly broken. Half the alien fleet was slag, and the other half was rapidly being conquered from the inside out. But the massive Veyron dreadnought, the flagship at the rear of the formation, began to charge a massive, planet-cracking weapon. Chapter 40, The Lunar Sub-Branch. The Veyron dreadnought was 5 miles long, a jagged spear of metal meant to crack planets open to harvest their cores. Its front maw opened, revealing a swirling singularity of dark matter. It was aiming not at the fleet, but past them, directly at Earth. It's targeting the Citadel. Kavya screamed through the comms. If that fires, the continent will shatter. I can't portal to it. Vikram yelled, decapitating an alien officer. Its shields are disrupting spatial magic. Deep in the heart of Earth, Reyansh felt the terrifying gravitational pull of the singularity weapon. The world core trembled. Reyansh couldn't block it with a shield. A singularity would just eat the mana. He had to destroy the ship before it fired. But the dreadnought was too far away for the fleet to reach in time. Reyansh realized what he had to do. The system had told him he was bound by roots. But who said roots had to stay in the dirt? Warning, host is attempting to extend roots into the vacuum of space. Extreme mana consumption detected. Reyansh tapped into the Earth's world core, pulling a terrifying, apocalyptic amount of mana. In the central courtyard, his trunk glowed like a miniature sun. He forced a massive, hyperdense root upward. It didn't stop at the surface. It shot into the sky like a spear thrown by a titan. It breached the atmosphere in seconds, a massive pillar of ironwood tearing through the exosphere. But distance in space is vast. The route would take too long to cross the void. So Reyansh cheated. He commanded Vikram, who was connected to his soul. Vikram! Cut the void. Vikram, standing on the captured alien cruiser, swung his Tier 3 greatsword at the empty space in front of the Varen dreadnought. A massive spatial rift tore open. Reyansh's root, rising from Earth, plunged into a localized portal in the atmosphere and instantly shot out of the rift directly beneath the Varen dreadnought. The colossal ironwood root, 20 miles long and thick as a skyscraper, slammed upward into the underbelly of the dreadnought. It didn't just pierce the hull, it grew violently, branching out, tearing the 5-mile-long ship apart from the inside. The singularity weapon destabilized, detonating harmlessly inside the ship's own contained shielding, vaporizing the alien commander and the bridge. Reyansh's route continued upward, carrying the wreckage of the dreadnought with it, until it slammed into the barren, grey surface of Earth's moon. The route planted itself deep into the lunar dust. Sub-branch established, lunar surface. Devour activated. Absorbing Varen dreadnought, host has successfully anchored to a celestial body. Evolution condition met. Ascending from Tier 4, territory sovereign, to Tier 5, realm tree, Reyansh's form on Earth expanded to mythic proportions. He was no longer just a tree. He was the planet's guardian, his roots tying Earth and the moon together in a massive, invisible web of leyline mana. The remaining Varen ships surrendered instantly, their engines powering down in absolute terror. Looking out of the viewport of his captured cruiser, Vikram stared in awe at the massive ironwood root glowing faintly against the dark side of the moon. The Earth was secure. The orbital space was theirs. The Yggdrasil Empire had taken its first step into the dark forest, and they had just planted a very violent flag. Chapter 41, The Lunar Harvest. The dark side of the moon was no longer a barren wasteland of grey dust and silent craters. It had become a garden of violence. Reyansh's massive ironwood root, 20 miles long and thick as a skyscraper, stood anchored deep within the lunar crust. Wrapped entirely within its crushing, spiked embrace was the wreckage of the 5-mile-long Varen dreadnought. The once mighty alien warship was slowly being digested, its biosteel hull creaking and snapping as thousands of glowing green rootlets siphoned its cosmic energy. Back on Earth, within the heart of the Yggdrasil citadel, Reyansh was experiencing a paradigm shift. Ascending to a Tier 5 realm tree fundamentally changed how he processed reality. He didn't just feel the weather or the tectonic plates of Earth anymore, he felt the gravitational pull of the solar system. He felt the solar wind washing over his lunar leaves. Devour complete, Tier 5 Varen dreadnought consumed. System points gained, 1 million SP. Lunar sub-branch fully operational. Low-gravity training grounds unlocked. Stellar leyline tap acquired, host can now absorb ambient solar radiation to synthesize pure mana. It was a staggering amount of wealth. 1 million system points. Reyansh could feel the sheer, unadulterated cosmic power humming in his sap. Up in orbit, the remnants of the alien blockade had been towed into the moon's orbit by the Yggdrasil armada. Thousands of surviving Varen soldiers multi-limbed, grey-skinned aliens stripped of their plasma armor were now shackled by ironwood vines in the cargo holds of the Emerald Sovereign. Vikram stood on the bridge of the mothership, looking down at the blue and green jewel of Earth. He should have felt triumphant. They had just defeated an alien armada without losing a single human ship. But as he looked out into the infinite, starry blackness of the void, a cold knot formed in his stomach. Do not celebrate yet, my son, Reyansh's voice echoed in Vikram's mind, perfectly mirroring his unease. The dreadnought's databanks have been decrypted. The Varen Empire was not a conquering force. They were scavengers. Miners. Vikram's grip tightened on his greatsword. If a fleet that massive was just a mining crew, what does their military look like? We are about to find out. Bring their commanding officer to the interrogation hold. The Dark Forest is watching, and we need a map. Chapter 42, The Dark Forest Speaks. The interrogation hold of the Emerald Sovereign was a stark, domed room made of polished black ironwood. In the center, bound to a heavy wooden chair by glowing, crimson-infused vines, sat the highest-ranking survivor of the alien fleet, Sub-Commander Vial. Vial was a grotesque, elongated creature with 4 arms and a face that resembled a deep-sea crustacean. Despite being a prisoner, his multi-optic eyes burned with arrogant, aristocratic amusement as Vikram, Kalan, and Kavya entered the room. You monkeys are playing with fire, Vial hissed, his translator implant rendering his clicks and chatters into perfect, sneering human speech. You think destroying a D-class harvesting fleet makes you a cosmic power? You are a statistical error. An anomaly. Vikram didn't say a word. He stepped forward and placed his hand on Vial's shoulder. Vikram's Tier 3 Blood Void Vanguard aura flared. Vial instantly shrieked in agony as the blood in his veins physically reversed its flow, defying the alien's biology. I did not ask for your opinion, Vikram said, his voice a low, terrifying rumble. I want to know who is coming next. Vial gasped for air, his crustacean mandibles clicking frantically. You don't understand the hierarchy. The integration isn't just about mana. It's a sorting algorithm. The Galactic Syndicate opens the dimensional barriers to flush out the weak universes and harvest their cores. Kalen stepped up, lighting a small, intensely hot blue flame on his thumb. And what happens when a weak universe bites back, bug? They send the exterminators. Vial laughed, though it was a broken, terrified sound. You registered on the cosmic web the moment your tree breached the atmosphere and touched the moon. You are now classified as a Tier 5 sovereign threat. The Syndicate won't send miners next. They will send the Concordat. The Concordat? Kavya asked, the temperature in the room plummeting. The Ethelgard Concordat, Vial whispered, genuine reverence and terror in his voice. Tier 7 Galactic Emperors. They don't fight with plasma and ships. They fight with the laws of physics. They will turn your sun into a supernova just to burn your little weed to ash. Vikram withdrew his hand. The blood flow in the alien returned to normal. Execute him, Reyansh's voice echoed from the wooden walls. And throw the body into the recycler. We have no use for cowards. Before Vial could scream, Vikram drew his great sword and took the alien's head. The three human generals stood in the silence of the ironwood room. The victory high was completely gone. Tier 7, Kalen muttered. We're Tier 3. The ancestor is Tier 5. How the hell do we fight something that can blow up the sun? We evolve, Vikram said, his eyes burning with absolute resolve. Again. Chapter 43, Roots of the Starforge. Reyansh did not panic. A god of nature does not fear the changing of the seasons, he adapts to them. With the knowledge that a Tier 7 galactic empire was likely turning its gaze toward Earth, Reyansh initiated the most massive industrial project in the history of the planet. Initiating protocol, the Starforge. Allocating 500,000 SP. Deep within the moon, the massive ironwood root began to hollow itself out, expanding into a cavernous, subterranean factory the size of a human metropolis. Reyansh combined the Varen biosteel technology with his own infinitely regenerating ironwood and the hyper-condensed mana of the lunar ley line. He wasn't just making weapons anymore. He was forging a new evolution for his descendants. My children, Reyansh's voice called to the millions of souls bound to his roots across the earth. The night is dark, and full of monsters. The armor of the past will not protect you from the void. Step into the roots. Across the Yggdrasil Empire, massive glowing portals opened in every citadel, every hospital, and every safe zone. Hundreds of thousands of outer branch and inner branch members stepped through, transported instantly to the lunar Starforge. Here, Reyansh bestowed his grandest blessing yet. Using the million SP he had harvested, he forced a mass evolution. Vikram, standing at the forefront of the army, felt the system interface shatter and rebuild itself in his mind. Descendant Vikram has ascended to Tier 4, Transcendent, Void Blood Sovereign. Domain unlocked, the Crimson Vacuum. Kavya gasped as her staff dissolved, fusing directly into her bloodstream. Descendant Kavya has ascended to Tier 4, Transcendent, Absolute Zero Empress. Domain unlocked, the Frozen Eternity. Kalen roared, his tattoos ripping free from his skin to orbit him like miniature, burning stars. Descendant Kalen has ascended to Tier 4, Transcendent, Supernova Tyrant. Domain unlocked, the Event Horizon. As his three generals hit Tier 4, the symbiosis loop hit Reyansh with the force of a cosmic Big Bang. Host receives massive transcendent stat amplification. Warning, host's mana capacity exceeds planetary limits. Reyansh's physical form on Earth ceased to be mere wood. His trunk crystallized entirely into a towering spire of pure, physical mana, shining like an emerald beacon visible from space. He was now a true Tier 5 realm tree, capable of bending the reality of the solar system. They were ready for a war. But the Concordat did not send an army. Chapter 44, A Ripple in the Void. It happened exactly 3 weeks after the destruction of the Varen Dreadnought. The Yggdrasil Armada, now boasting 50 heavily armed, ironwood biosteel cruisers, was running a patrol drill near the orbit of Mars. Kavya was commanding the fleet from the Emerald Sovereign, running combat simulations against holographic alien dreadnoughts. Sensors indicate a spatial anomaly, the ship's navigator, an outer branch technomancer, reported, his voice suddenly tight with panic. Ma'am, it's not a rift. Space is folding. Kavya stood up, her white eyes narrowing. Folded? You mean a wormhole? No. Something is physically folding the fabric of space to bridge the distance. It's stepping through. A mile in front of the Emerald Sovereign, the starry void simply bent in half, like a sheet of black paper. Stepping out of the fold was not a colossal warship, nor an armada. It was a single entity. It was roughly humanoid in shape, but it was massive, nearly 100 feet tall. It wore no armor and carried no weapons. Its body was composed entirely of swirling, hypercondensed cosmic dust and starlight, held together by a shimmering, golden outline of geometric perfection. Catastrophic threat detected. Entity, Tier 6 Star Saint, emissary of the Ethelgard Concordat. Kavya felt an oppressive, soul-crushing weight instantly fall over the entire fleet. The Tier 6 entity wasn't doing anything aggressive. Its mere existence in the physical universe exerted a gravitational and magical pressure that made the Tier 4 Transcendent Empress struggle to breathe. Shields to maximum. Kavya ordered, fighting through the crushing aura. All ships, lock target, but do not fire. The emissary did not acknowledge the 50 massive warships aimed at it. It drifted forward, stopping mere yards from the observation deck of the Emerald Sovereign. It raised a hand made of starlight, and a voice not heard in the ears, but vibrating in the very atoms of the ship spoke. I am Valerius, emissary of the Ethelgard Concordat. I seek the anomaly that claims sovereignty over this sector. I seek the World Tree. Kavya gripped the console, her domain of absolute zero instinctively flaring to protect her mind from the sheer volume of the emissary's telepathy. I speak for the tree, Kavya said, projecting her voice through the ship's outward comms. You have trespassed in Yggdrasil space. State your intent. The entity made of starlight seemed to tilt its head. My intent is mercy, Valerius replied. I have come to offer you the Zenith Crucible. Or I have come to erase you. The choice belongs to your god. Chapter 45, The Cosmic Ultimatum. The emissary did not wait for Kavya's permission. With a casual wave of its hand, the fabric of space folded again. In the blink of an eye, the massive, 100-foot-tall being of starlight bypassed the entire Yggdrasil armada, bypassed the moon's defense grid, and appeared hovering directly above the Yggdrasil citadel on Earth. Within the central courtyard, Vikram and Kalan drew their weapons. The 50,000 citizens of the citadel looked up in terror as the sun was eclipsed by the sheer, blinding radiance of the Tier 6 star saint. But Reyansh did not cower. His massive, crystalline emerald trunk flared with blinding intensity. From the canopy of the Tier 5 realm tree, a projection emerged. It was an avatar made of pure, highly condensed green ley line mana, taking the form of a towering, armored warrior the human form Reyansh had worn in his past life. Now magnified to godlike proportions. Reyansh's avatar floated upward to meet the emissary face to face in the sky above the city. You bypass my gates and threaten my people, Reyansh's avatar spoke, his voice cracking the clouds for hundreds of miles. Speak your piece, emissary, before I drag you into the earth. Valerius, the being of starlight, did not flinch. Fascinating, Valerius hummed. A sentient flora entity that has perfectly assimilated a human bloodline. A Tier 5 anomaly born from a dead integration zone. The Concordat was correct to notice you. Get to the point, Reyansh growled. The Galactic Syndicate does not allow unaligned Tier 5 entities to exist, Valerius stated, his voice devoid of malice or empathy, speaking only absolute cosmic law. You are a chaotic variable. The Concordat claims this sector. You have two options. Valerius raised one hand. Option 1, you surrender your world core to the Concordat. Your human pets will be integrated as slave labor for our mining worlds. You will be dismantled and used as a planetary battery. You will live, but you will serve. He raised his other hand. Option 2, you invoke the right of the Zenith Crucible. Your strongest champions will enter the galactic tournament. If they survive the proving grounds against the champions of 1,000 other worlds, the Syndicate will recognize Earth as an independent sovereign realm. If they fail, I will personally turn your sun into a black hole. Down in the courtyard, Vikram's eyes burned with cold, terrifying fury. He looked up at the avatar of his ancestor. He knew what the answer had to be. To submit was death. To fight was life. Ancestor, Vikram called out, his magically amplified voice cutting through the heavy tension of the sky. The first branch does not kneel to the stars. Reyansh's emerald avatar slowly turned to look at the emissary. The massive, crystalline broadsword in the avatar's hand ignited with the combined, transcendent power of his entire family. Tell your Concordat, Reyansh's voice echoed across the entire planet, a declaration of war heard by every living creature on Earth. The Yggdrasil Empire accepts the Crucible. Send us your champions, so my roots may drink their blood. Chapter 46, The Zenith Summons. The blinding avatar of Reyansh dissolved back into the massive, emerald canopy of the Yggdrasil citadel. But his declaration of war lingered in the air, a heavy, vibrating truth that silenced the city below. High above, Valerius, the Tier 6 emissary of starlight, did not display anger. Beings of his magnitude did not feel insulted by the defiance of lesser worlds, they only processed outcomes. Courage born of ignorance, Valerius's telepathic voice resonated, cold and absolute. But the laws of the Syndicate are binding. You have invoked the right. I accept. Valerius raised both of his massive, glowing hands. The fabric of space above Earth's atmosphere began to scream. The sky shattered, but not into the chaotic crimson rifts of the early apocalypse. This was controlled, geometric, terrifyingly precise magic. A colossal, golden ring composed of solid cosmic energy materialized in low orbit, perfectly aligned with the Yggdrasil citadel. Inside the ring, a portal swirled a vortex of deep, unfathomable violet light that looked like the eye of a dead god. The Zenith Crucible awaits, Valerius decreed. You may send 3 champions. They have 1 planetary rotation to enter the Zenith Gate. If they do not arrive, or if they fail the culling, your solar system will be eradicated. With a final, indifferent gaze upon the Earth, the emissary simply ceased to exist, folding himself back into the higher dimensions, leaving only the ominous, swirling Zenith Gate hanging in the sky. In the central courtyard, Vikram stared at the golden ring. 3 champions. You, Kavya, and Kalan, Reyansh's voice rumbled from the crystalline ironwood trunk, echoing with absolute certainty. You are my first branch. You are the apex of humanity. But you will not go alone. The earth at Vikram's feet parted. 3 perfectly smooth, pitch-black seeds, glowing with an intense, concentrated emerald light, floated up from the roots. The Zenith Crucible lies in a different dimension. A pocket of space controlled entirely by the Concordat. Their dimensional barriers are designed to cut off outside interference. But they do not understand the symbiosis. Reyansh guided the seeds forward. One pressed against Vikram's armored chest, one against Kavya's, and one against Kalen's. Accept the seed, Reyansh commanded softly. The seeds sank through their armor and flesh, nesting directly against their beating hearts. A jolt of pure, euphoric energy surged through their veins. They didn't just feel connected to the tree anymore. They felt as though the tree was living inside them. As long as those seeds beat within your chests, my roots are with you, Reyansh promised. Every kill you make in the crucible feeds me. And every drop of mana I absorb from this planet and its moon will flow directly into your veins. You will not fight as 3 mortals. You will fight as the vanguard of a god. Vikram drew his black greatsword, the void blood aura flaring around the blade. He looked at Kavya and Kalen. Say goodbye to your families, Vikram ordered. At dawn, we break the heavens. Chapter 47, the Obsidian Arena. Stepping through the Zenith Gate was not a journey, it was an unmaking. For a terrifying, stretched second, Vikram, Kavya, and Kalen felt their physical bodies dissolve into raw data, hurtling through the cosmic web at millions of times the speed of light. Before violently reconstituting on solid ground. Kavya stumbled, her boots hitting dark, metallic stone. She gasped, her Tier 4 lungs instantly adapting to the strange, heavy atmosphere. They stood on a floating shard of a shattered planet. The Zenith Crucible was not a simple coliseum. It was a macrostructure of incomprehensible scale. Millions of jagged planetary fragments, some the size of cities, some the size of continents, floated in a chaotic orbit around a dying, hyperdense red dwarf star. The fragments were chained together by massive, glowing tethers of pure gravitational magic. Ancestors' roots. Kalen whispered, the fiery stars orbiting his body dimming slightly as he took in the sheer scale of the arena. But the environment was the least of their concerns. Scattered across the floating shards were the champions of 1,000 other worlds. The Yggdrasil trio saw entities that defied sanity. There were hulking, silicon-based insectoids that breathed magma. There were floating geometric shapes composed of telekinetic energy. There were bipedal reptilians clad in advanced biomech suits that hummed with dark matter. Every single one of them radiated the suffocating pressure of Tier 4 or higher. As the Yggdrasil champions materialized, hundreds of alien eyes, sensors, and psychic probes locked onto them. A telepathic sneer rippled through the immediate vicinity, broadcasted by a group of towering, 4-armed warlords clad in golden armor. Carbon-based bipeds. Unaugmented flesh. A Tier 5 patron at best, one of the warlords broadcasted. They reek of raw, unrefined dirt. Easy points for the culling. Vikram didn't flinch. He rested his black greatsword on his shoulder, his eyes scanning the shattered landscape, mapping the gravitational anomalies. Suddenly, a voice boomed across the entire asteroid belt, echoing from the dying red dwarf itself. It was the overseer of the Crucible. Welcome, anomalies, tributes, and conquerors, to the Zenith Crucible, the voice thundered, dripping with cruel amusement. You represent 1,000 unaligned worlds. By the end of this cycle, only 100 will remain. The rules of the culling are absolute: survive, kill, gather the Zenith cores from the fallen. The culling begins, now. The gravitational tethers holding the planetary shards together violently snapped. The massive floating islands began to drift, crash, and collide into one another. The sky ignited with plasma fire, psychic screams, and the roars of 1,000 alien gods. The cosmic battle royale had begun. Chapter 48, First Blood in the Stars. The shard the Yggdrasil team stood upon violently tilted as a neighboring asteroid the size of Manhattan crashed into its side. Incoming! Kavya shouted, slamming her staff into the obsidian stone. Her Tier 4 domain, the frozen eternity, expanded outward in a massive, shimmering blue ring. The debris from the collision, moving at supersonic speeds, froze instantly in midair, suspended in a pocket of absolute zero. But the debris was just a distraction. Bursting through the frozen rocks came a hunting pack of 6 Xylok, the massive, magma-breathing silicon insectoids they had seen earlier. They moved with terrifying, jagged speed, their side-like forelegs vibrating fast enough to cut through molecular bonds. Carbon Meat, the lead insectoid, chattered telepathically, its mandibles dripping with superheated lava. We will burn the water from your veins. They want our water. Kalen laughed, a booming, psychotic sound. His eyes turned into pools of blinding white fire. Let's see how they handle the heat. Kalen launched himself forward like a missile. He didn't punch or cast a fireball. He simply activated his domain. The event horizon. The gravity around Kalen inverted. The space within a 100-foot radius of the supernova tyrant violently collapsed inward. 3 of the massive insectoids were yanked off their feet, shrieking as they were pulled into the gravitational singularity Kalen had generated in the palm of his hand. He clenched his fist. The singularity detonated outward in a localized, hypercondensed solar flare. The 3 Xylok were instantly vaporized, their indestructible silicon armor turning into a fine mist of glass. But the lead insectoid, possessing a higher tier of agility, bypassed Kalen's domain. It blurred past the fire, appearing directly above Vikram, its vibrating scythes aiming to decapitate the human patriarch. Vikram didn't even look up. Void blood execution, Vikram murmured. He didn't swing his sword. He simply reached out with his mind and grasped the biological equivalent of blood pumping through the alien silicon body, a highly pressurized, molten liquid. Vikram clenched his hand. Above him, the massive insectoid froze in midair. Its exoskeleton bulged unnaturally. With a sickening, metallic crunch, the alien imploded. Vikram had violently reversed the flow of its internal magma, creating a vacuum inside its own carapace that crushed its organs to dust. The alien's shattered husk fell heavily to the stone, dropping a glowing, golden orb from its chest. A zenith core. Vikram calmly stepped forward and picked it up. He felt the pure, cosmic energy radiating from it. 1, Vikram said softly. 99 to go. Chapter 49, The Concordat's Hound. The massacre of the Zylok hunting pack did not go unnoticed. The surrounding alien champions, who had dismissed the humans as weak, carbon-based fodder, paused their own skirmishes. The sheer brutality and efficiency of the Yggdrasil team shifted the threat assessment. But before the lesser champions could decide whether to swarm them or flee, the battlefield was eclipsed by a terrifying shadow. A massive figure dropped from a higher orbiting shard, landing on their platform with an impact that cracked the obsidian stone in half. It was a seated champion of the Ethelgard Concordat, a specialized executioner designed to cull threats early. It was a golem composed entirely of shifting, geometric prisms of dark violet energy. It had no face, no joints, just a towering, 15-foot-tall humanoid silhouette of pure, absorbing magic. Catastrophic threat detected. Entity, Tier 4 Apex Nullifier, Concordat Hound, dot. Trait, Absolute Kinetic and Magical Absorption. You have drawn the eye of the Concordat, Weeds the golem broadcasted, its voice a synthesized drone of overlapping frequencies. Your kinetic output is high. Your thermal output is high. I will consume both. Return to dust. The nullifier raised a prismatic hand. A beam of pure, erasing anti-magic shot toward Kavya. I've got it. Kalen roared, stepping in front of the Empress. He crossed his arms, summoning a massive shield of compressed solar plasma. The violet beam struck the shield, but there was no explosion. No clash of power. The nullifier simply drank it. Kalen's solar shield drained away like water into a drain, and the golem's violet prisms glowed brighter, growing larger with the absorbed energy. Magic feeds it. Kavya yelled, analyzing the data streaming into her mind through the system. It absorbs energy to increase its mass. Then let's see how it handles a blade, Vikram growled. He blurred forward, his great sword aimed at the creature's center mass. But the moment his ironwood blade struck the prismatic chest, the kinetic force of the blow was instantly nullified. The sword stopped dead, vibrating harmlessly. The golem backhanded Vikram. The impact contained all the kinetic energy Vikram had just swung with, multiplied by the golem's own mass. Vikram was launched backward, crashing through 3 jagged spires of rock before tumbling to a halt, coughing up a mouthful of blood. Your primitive force is useless, the nullifier droned, stepping forward. I am the void that drinks the fire. I am the silence that ends the swing. Kalen hovered in the air, his eyes blazing. You drink fire? You absorb heat. Kalen spread his arms wide. The tattoos peeled off his body entirely, forming a halo of blinding white miniature stars behind him. Then choke on this. Kalen screamed. He didn't fire a beam. He didn't throw a fireball. Kalen forced his domain inward, condensing his supernova tyrant class into a single, terrifying concept. He grabbed the golem. The creature tried to absorb him, but Kalen was no longer radiating heat outward, he was generating an internal gravitational collapse. He turned his own body into the density of a dying star. The nullifier's prismatic body began to crack, shrieking as the infinite gravity of Kalen's event horizon physically tore its absorbing crystals apart. The monster tried to drain the energy, but there was too much. It was trying to drink an ocean through a straw. With a blinding flash of white light, Kalen compressed the golem into a singularity the size of a marble, before shattering it into a billion harmless, floating particles. Chapter 50, The Omnipresent Shadow. Light years away, in the serene, emerald-lit courtyard of the Yggdrasil citadel on Earth, the silence was shattered by a massive, seismic boom. Reyansh's colossal, crystalline trunk flared so brightly it temporarily blinded the citizens below. Symbiosis link active, Descendant Kalen has defeated a Tier 4 Apex Nullifier. Massive cosmic data assimilated. Host gains plus 150,000 all stats. System points gained, 5 million SP. The sheer volume of cosmic power rushing through the quantum link of the seeds was staggering. Reyansh felt his roots on Earth and the moon vibrate with enough stored energy to crack the crust of the planet. But Reyansh didn't just passively absorb the stats. The death of the Concordat's hound gave him a terrifying realization. Through the seed implanted in Kalen's chest, Reyansh could see the zenith crucible. He could feel the shattered obsidian stone. He could taste the dying red dwarf star. The Syndicate thought they had locked Earth out by forcing the champions into an isolated dimension. They had no idea that the champions were the tree. You absorb my enemies, and you feed me, Reyansh's voice whispered through the void, reaching Vikram, Kavya, and Kalen as they stood victorious over the shattered golem. But I am not a passive god. I am the realm tree. And this soil looks fertile. In the zenith crucible, on the shattered shard where the trio stood, the dark, metallic stone beneath their boots suddenly cracked. From the boots of Vikram's armor, microscopic, hyperdense green rootlets began to slither out. Fueled by the 5 million SP Reyansh had just gained, the roots drove directly into the obsidian stone of the alien arena. Hostile environment detected, Zenith Crucible. Commencing sub-branch infiltration. Bypassing dimensional locks. Far above the crucible, in the gilded observation decks of the Concordat overseers, warning sirens suddenly blared. A Tier 6 overseer stared at the holographic mapping of the arena in absolute horror. "Sir," a technician shrieked. "Sector 4. It's being corrupted. An unauthorized dimensional anchor is rewriting the gravitational tethers." "Impossible," the overseer snarled. "The crucible is sealed. What is the source of the anomaly?" On the holographic map, the dark, shattered shards of Sector 4 were rapidly turning a bright, virulent emerald green. Down in the arena, Vikram wiped the blood from his chin and smiled, feeling the massive, overwhelming presence of his ancestor filling the alien dimension. Reyansh was no longer just fighting a proxy war. The ancestral tree had breached the walls of the cosmic arena, and his roots were hungry for the stars.